Good morning. Welcome to the Subcommittee on Energy and Environment and to this very important hearing. The National Academy of Engineering has called the North American electric grid the supreme engineering achievement of the 20th century. The grid is one of our greatest strengths, but if not properly protected, it could become one of our greatest weaknesses. More than any other technology, the grid is the long pole in the tent of America's economy and national security. All of our nation's critical systems, financial services, healthcare, telecommunications, transportation, water, defense, law enforcement, and so on, depend on the grid. Remarkably, 99% of the electric energy used to power our military facilities, including critical strategic command assets, come from the commercially operated grid. Our dependence on the grid will only deepen as we move towards greater reliance on automation and information technology. This past Thursday, I was joined by a number of other members of this subcommittee at a classified briefing on grid security. I assure you the vulnerabilities of the grid are every bit as urgent as the weaknesses in transportation security that were so tragically revealed by the events of September 11th. A coordinated attack on the grid could literally shut down the U.S. economy, putting lives at risk and costing tens of billions of dollars. Moreover, unlike a storm knocking out power lines that can be replaced in a matter of days, an attack on the grid could result in damage requiring months or years to fix. That said, tough questions remain as to precisely what shape any new authorities and mandates should take. This morning, we will consider two bills that address these issues. One, sponsored by Mr. Barrow, which Chairman Waxman and I have co-sponsored, and a second sponsored by Homeland Security Committee Chairman Benny Thompson.
Today, we will seek additional answers with a focus on the most productive way to ensure the security of our energy infrastructure. I know we can work together on bipartisan legislation to address this very, very serious issue. It is my hope that legislation to protect our critical infrastructure will also include Alaska, Hawaii, and our territories. Currently, NERC does not cover those areas, and our critical national security assets, particularly in Alaska and Hawaii, are too important to ignore. Domestic infrastructure should be protected for cybersecurity generally, in addition to physical and electromagnetic threats. Additionally, I don't think it is enough to just cover the bulk power system. We also must include the distribution system. It has become clear that the distribution system outages and vulnerabilities can lead to problems with the bulk power system, and critical defense facilities are connected at the distribution level. There is no question that this legislation should be comprehensive. We should seek to fill as many security gaps as possible. The threats that we face are too serious and abundant to only address a small portion of our vulnerability. The stakes could not be higher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, concur that this is a very important meeting, and I appreciate you all coming to help us sort through this. I had recently retired about a year ago from the Army Reserves. I've served 3 years actively in West Germany, and I've throughout my years here, I've always followed up on comments about the electromagnetic pulse concern, whether from natural occurrences or ships or a nuclear burst. And we've always talked about smart metering as like the holy grail of energy efficiency. I think some people would argue that we set ourselves more at risk on some of this if it's an intentional electromagnetic burst in the atmosphere because of the ability to fry out this smart metering and all this solid state applications, and the recovery time would be much greater than if we kept it simple. So that will be my focus to debate, to hear, to try to figure out what is good and how far should we go, but again, being careful that we don't try to automate so much that we actually decrease our ability to have a quick recovery, whether there be an intentional electromagnetic pulse burst or something that will naturally occur that will cause us great harm.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for moving this legislation forward and for the opportunity to work together on this issue of critical importance to our homeland security. I'm a sponsor of H.R. 2165, the Bulk Power System Protection Act of 2009, one of the subjects of today's hearing, because I'm convinced that the threats to our critical energy infrastructure are every bit as real and every bit as dangerous as any threat we can imagine. I'm pleased that this Congress and this committee have given this a high priority and will push forward to pass meaningful legislation. I obviously think that my bill is on the right track, but I'm open to new angles and incorporating new ideas into the mix. I encourage my colleagues to co-sponsor H.R. 2165, and let's use it as a foundation for working together on these solutions. The key to sustainable security is that government and industry identify and address evolving threats against our country together. As our society becomes more and more reliant on technological advances, we actually become more and more vulnerable to debilitating attack. This hearing is an important first step toward closing security gaps which threaten us. The time to act is now. The American people expect it, and our national security demands it.
On a related note, as smart grid technology is added to the bulk power system, greater cybersecurity protections will be required, given that this technology provides more access points to attackers and can increase the grid's cyber vulnerabilities. The SIP standards will apply to some, but not all, smart grid applications. Physical attacks against the power grid can cause equal or greater destruction than cyber attacks. One example of a physical threat is an electromagnetic pulse, or EMP event. In 2001, Congress established a commission to assess the threat from EMP, and in 2004 and again in 2008, the EMP Commission issued its reports. Among the findings of the reports were that a single EMP attack could seriously degrade or shut down a large part of the electric power grid. Depending upon the attack, significant parts of the electric infrastructure could be, quote, out of service for periods measured in months to a year or more, end quote. In addition to man-made attacks, EMP events are also naturally generated, caused by solar flares and storms disrupting the Earth's magnetic field. Such events can be powerful and can also cause significant and prolonged disruptions to the power grid. Regardless of whether an EMP event is man-made or occurs naturally, it can cause equal or even greater destruction than a cyber attack, and the federal government should have no less ability to protect against it. In September of this year, FERC initiated a research project with the Oak Ridge National Laboratory to study the effects of an EMP event on the United States and to identify mitigation measures to protect against it. DOE and DHS have joined in the study, and we expect to complete it within 6 months. The standards development system utilized under the Federal Power Act develops mandatory reliability standards using an open and inclusive process based on consensus. Although it can be an effective mechanism with dealing with the routine requirements of the power grid, it is too slow, too independent, and too open to address threats to the power grid that endanger national security. FERC's current legal authority is insufficient to assure direct, timely, and mandatory action to protect the grid, particularly where certain information should not be publicly disclosed.